So I've been playing Crash Bandicoot 2. Okay, so I've been noticing a very severe lack of happy joy on my YouTube channel lately. Thing is, I've been mostly reviewing a lot of dark, serious horror games with adult themes and death and just all kinds of evil. So I really wanted to switch things up this week by playing something happy. Now, because of my cold and dried up wooden heart, there really aren't a lot of things left in this world that cheer me up, I'm afraid. Well, other than listening to my favorite band, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, of course. But it's hard for me to deny that whenever I think of Crash Bandicoot, I am overcome with a slight feeling of warmth within my otherwise cold and lifeless body, only to find out moments later that I actually shat myself.
Oh God. Oh my God, it's everywhere. Oh God.
Anyway, development for Crash Bandicoot 2 started the very same year the first game was released. It is said that Naughty Dog CEO Herr Weißgrubengabe actually used whips to quote-unquote motivate the dev team to make the games as quickly as possible. And it certainly paid off, as they managed to release the game the following year. Now, of course, such a work ethic will eventually make you as cold and lifeless as I am, which led to the creation of the very depressing The Last of Us years later. But at the time, the plethora of high-quality platformers definitely made my childhood at least 60% less awful. And I mean, it's not like they Ubisofted their franchises either, as all the games were incredibly solid and almost completely bugless. And not only that, but the graphical leap between the first and second game was quite something, all thanks to their new engine called Ghoul 2, which was 3 times faster than their previous engine, as it could handle 10 times the animation frames and twice the polygon count, or so saith Wikipedia. Still, from a gameplay standpoint, not a whole lot changed. They just added 1 or 2 gimmicks and overall made sure everything played a bit better. And of course, the story would continue from where the first game left off. The story in question follows the titular Crash Bandicoot as he once again foils the evil Dr. Cortex's evil plan. Well, there's a bit more to it, I guess. I mean, Tex wants to use the crystals to power his mind control device, but he can't, so he tricks Crash into collecting the crystals for him by pretending to be good, and oh my god, gameplay, whoa. Now, just like the first game, Crash Bandicoot 2 is of course a platformer, this time with the objective of finding all the crystals. However, unlike Banjo-Kong 64, it isn't really so much about collecting these crystals as the game is actually about actual platforming. It's not a collectathon, and instead it's a linear 3D platformer. Unlike the first game, however, it isn't quite as punishing. Sure, it still draws a lot of inspiration from the early Sonic and Mario titles, but the focus shifted more towards complicated enemy patterns rather than tricky jumping. I mean, the first game really had some shit you'd usually only see in Mario ROM hacks. And while I do like that approach quite a lot, I honestly prefer this, as I'm not getting angry at the game all the goddamn time. But despite that, it's still a very traditional platformer at its core. So you jump across gaps and other obstacles, deal with enemies, and pick up collectibles. Unlike Mario and Sonic though, these collectibles aren't just hanging around, as the Wumpa fruits are hidden inside boxes. Along with these Wumpa fruits, the boxes also contain 1-ups, and the iconic amongst some Aku Aku masks, which allow you to take an extra hit. Now, as I already said, the crystals aren't really collectibles in the traditional sense of the word, as there are usually only about 2 or 3 different kinds of crystals per level, and only one of these is mandatory. The mandatory ones are the purple crystals, which will always be in plain sight, and you really have to fuck up pretty bad to miss any. Now, where shit gets interesting is with these optional crystals called gems, all of which require you to do different things to be able to collect them. The white gems definitely being the easiest to acquire, as you get these by breaking all the boxes in a level. The color gems, however, are a bit tricky, as it can be quite unclear how to actually get these, especially on your first playthrough. I mean, this blue gem, for instance, is acquired by not breaking any boxes at all in the first level, and this green one requires you to jump through a wall even though there's no indication you can actually do so. Now, as a kid, discovering these by myself was pretty fucking awesome. However, I can imagine that as an adult, the cryptic nature of these gems can just seem a little bit like bullshit. Cause without a guide of any kind, the chances of you finding all of these by yourself are pretty fucking slim. Luckily though, just like every other platformer ever, there is a hub world, so you're always able to go back to every level at any given time. I, however, have zero completionist mentality. I completed the game once years ago, and that's really enough for me. I did collect a few gems just for the purpose of this review, but if it were up to me, I likely wouldn't have bothered. So it's a good thing then that the game's totally cool with that. Sure, there's a secret ending and all that, but it's not like you really need to collect your ass off to advance or anything like that. Thing is, the game has 5 hub worlds, all with 5 stages and 1 boss. And all you really need to do to be able to finish the game is play through all of these stages once, pick up the blatantly obvious purple crystals, and then kill the boss to advance to the next hub world. Now, as I mentioned in my review of the first game, bosses never really were this series' strong point, and this game is no exception. I mean, it's not like they're badly designed or broken or anything like that, but when compared to the stages, they're just laughably easy. They all have a simple pattern which may require you to die once the first time around to understand it, and then you just rinse and repeat the same few actions over and over until their life bar runs out. And yeah, it's not like they aren't any fun to play through or anything, but they just feel like a bit of an afterthought mechanically speaking. Now, as I said before, this game is a bit less about straight up platforming and more about the large variety of enemies and other kinds of obstacles. Just like the first game, Crash still has the ability to jump on shit and spin dash, but new to this game are the abilities to slide into enemies and body slam the ground. And all of the game's enemies are designed around this now slightly larger set of moves. For instance, some of them will have spikes on top so you won't be able to jump on them, or others will be required to be tackled from below because they have an electric ring of doom kind of thing going on. And there's also a shit ton of other examples like this that I don't feel like listing off right now. In terms of controls though, the game is about as tight as you can legally get. Whereas the first game still had some awkward feeling momentum here and there, this game absolutely pins the tail on the donkey while hitting the hammer on the head. Really, it feels like they completely nailed what they were going for, which is also why they didn't bother to change it at all for the games following it. And the game also runs pretty smooth as well. The frame rate only empties its bowels over my chest and forces me to sing "I'm a little piggy, look at me, playing in the mud, oink oink oink," while saving, so really the only thing that keeps you from being the best there ever was, apart from yourself, are the gimmicky stages. Now, most of them are fine because they don't really detract from anything, but the surfing minigame kinda does, as the surfboard has tank controls even though the rest of the game doesn't. And while I do kinda like the idea, it's just extremely hard to control precisely. Also, the jetpack stages are pretty fucking awful as well. Thing is that up is down and down is up, while X moves you forward because up is down and down is up. It is quite fuck. But despite that, this is still one of those games where you're the only one to blame for your own deaths. And because of that, I'm actually kinda disappointed they didn't add at least a few levels based around high-level platforming, as I feel that some of the harder levels from the first game would be so much more fun to play through with the tight as fuck controls of this one. But sadly, PS1 modding just isn't really a thing. Anyway, in terms of graphics, I'd argue that both this and its sequel are among the prettiest fully 3D rendered PS1 games. Thing is, for as far as the 5th console generation goes, I'd say that the N64 was probably better at doing 3D. I mean, you wouldn't really have to look very long at the original Silent Hill or Metal Gear Solid to see that the PS1 wasn't always incredibly graceful. And don't get me wrong, I vastly prefer the PS1 over the N64 because I'm a fan-biased whore, but the jaggy polygons that seem to be grinding up against each other don't always make for a very flattering experience. And yeah, in a way, I'd argue that it kinda adds some detail to the otherwise quite empty-looking worlds of games like Donkey Kong 64, but at least it doesn't look like the polygons were attending a reggaeton night. It's a good thing then that Crash Bandicoot 2 and 3 seem to be among the very few games that don't seem to do this. And I mean, I am by no means a game designer, so I can't really say if this is incredibly impressive or not, but the fact that there are only a few games that do this really make me think that it is. Although I'm guessing the fact that the game is incredibly linear may have had something to do with that as well. Thing is all you see really is all there is to see, as you can't even turn the fucking camera. So I can imagine that they could have fine-tuned the living shit out of everything. A similar technique certainly worked for The Last of Us, which, when you break it down, really is just a bunch of highly detailed corridors. Either way though, I really like this game a lot. Mostly because I grew up with it, but also for all the reasons I mentioned in this video. In my opinion, this is just a very well-crafted platformer that, while obviously not perfect, does so much more right than it does wrong. Which is kind of impressive considering Naughty Dog's communist work ethics.